So part G gives us an equation C of t that has an integral in it that models the number of tigers that can be found on Carol Baskin's property. Okay, so if I wanted to figure out how many tigers were on her property in February, I would look at C of 2, right? This right here is modeling the total amount of tigers on her property at a given value of time. What we're asked to do is figure out who is gaining more tigers per month at time t equals 2. So we're asked to calculate the rate at which the amount of tigers on her property is changing at t equals 2. So what we need to do is actually figure out c prime of t, and then we need to evaluate c prime of 2. Okay, so it's important to translate what this question is asking. So we'll go ahead and look at the derivative of c prime of t. The derivative of 4t is just going to be t, and then in this next step, we're actually calculating the derivative of an integral. Okay, so we need to go ahead and remind ourselves how to do that utilizing the fundamental theorem of calculus. So what I see is that my variable is in the lower bound, so I'm actually going to have to flip that. Flipping my bounds is going to change my sign. Okay, so we would go ahead and write that as minus the integral from 3 to 2t of 20 over x squared. Okay, but we actually haven't done the derivative, right? So this is maybe bad notation. So actually what I'm going to do is back up a step and just work on manipulating my c of t function first. Okay, so kind of setting myself up to apply that fundamental theorem of calculus. So we're going to rewrite c of t is equal to 4t minus the integral with the integration bounds flipped upside down. Okay, this will actually set us up a little bit better to take the derivative. So when I differentiate, I get c prime of t equals 4, and then utilizing the fundamental theorem of calculus, I need to plug in my upper bound. So I'll get minus 20 over 2t squared, and then we have to remember the chain rule. We have to multiply by the derivative of 2t, which is 2. Okay, so this will give me c prime of t equals 4 minus, it looks like 20 times 2 is 40 over 4t squared. This simplifies a bit more to be c prime of t equals 4 minus 10 over t squared. And the only reason I'm doing that simplification is because I know I'm going to have to evaluate the value 2 in, and so maybe in this form it's a little bit easier to do that than in this form, but either one will work. Either one will give you credit on the AP exam. So again, we need to look at the rate at t equals 2. So we're going to go ahead and evaluate c prime of 2. So here that's going to look like c prime of 2 is equal to 4 minus, and I'm going to have to remind myself, it was 10. 4 minus 10 over 2 squared. Okay. If you need to, you can go ahead and do that calculation out, right? You can rewrite that as 4 minus 10 divided by 4. So 4 minus 10 divided by 4. You'll have a calculator on the AP exam though, so you could just go from 4 minus 10 over 2 squared right to 1.5. Okay, so what this is telling us is that c prime of 2 is equal to 1.5 tigers per month. Okay, but notice that's not what the question is asking. It's asking for you to decide who's gaining more tigers. Is Carol Baskin or Joe Exotic gaining more tigers at t equals 2? So we need to go all the way back, I believe, to question D. Okay, so from part D, you found that the rate at which Joe was gaining. So again, so part D looked at the rate at which the number of tigers on Joe's property was changing. So part D, you found that f of t was equal to -1. Okay, so, or I'm sorry, f prime of 2. F prime of 2 is equal to -1. That meant that Joe was losing tigers, 1 tiger a month, at a rate of 1 tiger a month at t equals 2. So we need to go ahead and compare these two values. And we can see pretty quickly that because Carol Baskin's rate is positive, right, she is gaining more tigers per month at t equals 2. So a nice kind of way to conclude this would be to say that 1.5 tigers per month is greater than -1 tiger per month, which implies that Carol is gaining more tigers per month at time t equals 2. Okay, so a little bit going on here, right? We had to remind ourselves how to take the derivative of an integral using the fundamental theorem of calculus. We needed to evaluate that derivative, and then we also needed to make a comparison. So I want to talk through the points and how they were divided here. So for finding the derivative, that was worth 2 points. So you got 2 points for calculating the correct derivative here. So finding c prime of 2 in either of the forms. Actually, it looks like I didn't highlight all of those, right? So this work right here was worth 2 points. You got 1 point for recognizing that you needed to evaluate the points 2. So that's another point. And then you got the 4th point for this analysis, the comparison between the rate at which Carol is gaining tigers and the rate at which Joe is gaining tigers. Okay.